Good morning, everyone. My name is Punam. Mahana. I'm a second year philosophy. Today, my presentation topic is epistemic injustice and the limitations of virtue epistemology, a study of Miranda Ficker's theory of credibility and power. Miranda Ficker is a 21st century philosopher who uh, introduced epistemic injustice in her book in 2007. Miranda Ficker's concept of epistemic injustice comes under social epistemology and virtue epistemology framework. But before discussing social epistemology, virtue epistemology, and epistemic injustice, let me give a brief introduction to what epistemology is in general. So, epistemology is a branch of philosophy that deals with the study of knowledge. It is concerned with the understanding what knowledge is, how do we acquire knowledge, and how can we justify what we claim to know. Traditionally, while epistemology asks whether something is true or false, it also focuses on the conditions under which a belief counts as knowledge. One of the central concerns in epistemology has always been to distinguish knowledge from mere beliefs and opinions. Not everything we believe qualifies not everything we believe qualifies as knowledge. And therefore, philosophers have tried to identify the criteria that separate genuine knowledge from simple assumptions and guesses. In this context, epistemology is not about collecting facts, but about analyzing the nature and structure of knowledge itself. However, while traditional epistemology focuses largely on individual knower and their beliefs, this approach has certain limitations. It tends to overlook the broader social context in which knowledge is actually formed and shared. This leads to an important shift in perspective, which I'm going to be presenting today, moving on from an individual understanding to a more socially grounded one. In traditional epistemology, one of the most important theories of knowledge is the idea of justified true belief, originally discussed by Plato. According to this theory, for something to count as knowledge, three conditions must be satisfied. First, the person must believe it. Second, the belief must be true. And third, there must be a justification, meaning there are good reasons or evidence for that belief. Although the idea of justified true belief seems convincing, it was later challenged by Edmund Gettier, who showed that these three conditions are not always sufficient for knowledge. Gettier argued that it is possible for a belief to be true and justified, and yet still not count as knowledge. This usually happens in cases where the belief turns out to be true purely by coincidence, or what we call epistemic luck. Apart from the limitation presented by Gettier on JTB, traditional epistemology is limited because it highly focuses on individualistic knowledge and assumes knowledge is formed within a single law. It overlooks the role of testimony, even though much of our knowledge comes from others, such as books, teachers, media, and so on. It also ignores how trust and credibility are shaped by social factors like identity and status. Further, it neglects the role of power and inequality, where not all individuals are equally heard or recognized as knowers. In response to the limits of traditional epistemology, Philosophers turn to social epistemology, which views knowledge as socially shaped rather than purely individual. It examines how knowledge is formed through interactions, institutions, and social structures. Factors like culture, education, and communication influence what we know, and not all voices are equally valued. As Smith notes, social conditions affect knowledge, highlighting the link between the individual knower and society. While social epistemology helps us to understand that knowledge is shaped by social condition, it also raises an important concern. If knowledge depends on social interactions, credibility, and institution, then these processes are not always fair or neutral. Some individuals are heard and trusted more, while others are ignored and dismissed. This led to the concept of epistemic injustice, where people are wronged in their role as knowers due to bias, prejudice, and unequal distribution of credibility. In this context, virtue epistemology, an important development in contemporary epistemology, shifts focus from knowledge as a product of the knower's epistemic abilities and virtues, such as perception, reasoning, intellectual humility, and open mindedness. Uh, it includes reliable reliable cognitive processes, and responsibilism, intellectual characteristics, both stresses epistemic agency and responsibility. However, in practice, credibility is often shaped by social identity and power rather than genuine epistemic virtue, creating a gap between ideal evolution and real world attribution, thereby opening the space for epistemic injustice. Epistemic injustice. The idea of epistemic injustice is developed by Miranda. It refers to a distinct kind of injustice that occurs specifically in relation to knowledge. At first, it might seem like it is simply about unfair distribution of epistemic goods such as information or education. However, in such cases, the injustice is not truly epistemic in nature, since the problem lies more in general inequality than knowledge itself. Instead, epistemic injustice should be understood as a wrong done to someone in their capacity as a knower. It occurs when individuals are unfairly treated in processes related to knowing, understanding, or sharing knowledge. Two major forms of epistemic injustice, as explained by Miranda are testimonial injustice and hermeneutical injustice. Testimonial injustice occurs when prejudices cause a hearer to give less credibility to a speaker's word because of prejudice. In such cases, the listener does not fully trust or accept what the speaker is saying, not because the content is weak, but because of who the speaker is. This usually happens due to social factors like gender, caste, race, or social status. For example, a person may not be taken seriously in a discussion simply because they belong to a marginalized group, even if their statement is valid and well supported. Testimonial injustice can be understood through the way power operates in social interactions. Power operates not only through individual but also structurally through social system, institutions, and shared meanings. A specific form of this is identity power, which arises from shared social understanding of identities like gender or race, shaping how people are perceived. Testimonial injustice occurs when this identity power influences credibility judgments. For example, a woman's claims are dismissed not due to the lack of evidence but because of gendered assumptions. This form of social and identity power directly shapes testimonial injustice by influencing how credibility is assigned, often leading to certain speakers being unfairly disbelieved and dismissed. The second type of epistemic injustice Miranda Africa discussed is hermeneutical injustice, as identified by her. It occurs at the level of understanding rather than communication. It arises when individuals cannot properly make sense of or articulate their experiences due to lack of shared conceptual resources. This happens because certain groups are excluded from shaping collective interpretative resources, uh, creating a gap in understanding. As a result, individuals are disadvantaged not just in being believed, but in understanding and expressing their own experience. My analysis on Fricker's view. Miranda Fricker offers a clear response to testimonial injustice through cultivation of epistemic virtues, especially in in, especially testimonial justice. In such cases, the problem lies in biased credibility judgments that lead to a credibility deficit, and this can be corrected at the individual level through fairness, reflexivity, and critical awareness. However, hermeneutical injustice operates differently. It does not stem from individual prejudice, but from a collective gap in interpretative resources, where certain groups are excluded from shaping shared meanings. As a result, their experience cannot be properly understood and articulated because the necessary concepts are missing. This makes a virtue based solution less directly applicable. While individuals can adjust biased credibility judgments in testimonial contexts, they cannot fully address structural deficiencies in collective understanding. Addressing hermeneutical injustice, therefore, requires broader social and institutional change, such as more inclusive meaning making practices and the development of new conceptual resources. This reveals an asymmetry in Fricker's framework. Testimonial injustice has a clear individual level corrective, whereas hermeneutical injustice is structural and lacks a similarly immediate solution, highlighting a limitation of relying solely on virtue epistemology. Conclusion. While Miranda Ficker's framework provides a powerful account of epistemic injustice, it reveals an important asymmetry. The virtue based approach offers a clear corrective in testimonial context, but is less suited to addressing the structural and collective dimensions of hermeneutical injustice. This highlights the need to go beyond individual virtue and consider broader social and institutional response. These are the references I have used. Thank you.